Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Jasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Jasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Jamuna Tiravana Chadi Jamuna Tiravana Chadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Jasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Jasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Jamuna Tiravana Chadi Jamuna Tiravana Chadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayo Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivajagacharya Astatarasatasi Srimad His Divine Grace Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Gaur Pimanandi Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Continuing and almost concluding, Canto 10 chapter 35. The Gopis sing as Krishna wanders in the forest. It's how it's titled. Yesterday, so the way that the chapter is structured is there's an introductory verse and a closing verse, and all the other verses in between are in pairs. And we finished the pairs. There's the final verse. And so in revisiting the chapter, one of the themes in the chapter is the special nature of Krishna's flute and how that flute affects different residents of Vrindavan according to their rasa with Krishna. And one of the really astounding things we heard is even those that are in the Shanta rasa stage, the rocks, the river, the clouds, and so forth, the trees and creepers, they become stimulated by hearing the sound of Krishna's flute, so that Shanta rasa reaches a crescendo of ecstasy, and they exhibit those ecstasies in different ways. The gopis understand this. They're not just seeing Pandita Samadarshana, they're seeing the ecstatic love of Krishna and all the living entities in Braja, what to speak of themselves. So the meditation, well here, meditation goes morning, midday, evening. He's come back, and the residents of Vrindavan are singing songs about Krishna and his wonderful pastimes and so on. The last sentence that we read from yesterday, so it's the uniqueness of Braja and the residents of Braja, both. We heard yesterday that Braja is so many miles by so many miles, or so many square miles, or so many different measures than square miles. But just like Krishna is all-pervasive, actually Braja is all-pervasive. So wherever you are, it's Brindavan, in one sense. And then there's Vrindavan. And even the trees, so the last sentence is, I'll read the last paragraph. In describing the glories of Dwarka, it is shown that different times, like morning and evening, were present simultaneously. The appearance of Goloka, situated above all else, indicates its majesty. However, Goloka actually pervades everywhere. Then, in the forest of Vrindavan, the Kadamba trees, unknown on earth, untouched by material senses and objects, are eternally perfect. And not just, don't change the volume. Okay. Not just the trees, but everything. Eternally perfect. And conscious and in a relationship with Krishna. And Krishna, when Krishna comes to Vrindavan, his Prakat Leela are performed in Vrindavan. Everyone goes bananas. Just touching the trees and creepers with his foot touching the water, everything just becomes totally enlivened in ecstasy. So we're going to hear some more about that. This is Jiva Goswami, Krishna Sandarbha, Anuchhed 106. It's a long Anuchhed. This is text 97 of that Anuchhed. And he refers back to text 75 of that same Anuchhed, which says, those who act piously and control the mind and senses easily attain Swargaloka. he's paraphrasing something that we heard yesterday in detail, reference from Harivangsha that describes the super elevated position of Goloka. So to attain Swarga, here's what you have to do. Control the mind and senses. Though they who perform spiritual austerities attain the spiritual world. However, the planet Goloka, the realm of Surabhi cows, is very difficult to attain. That's within the same Krishna Sandarbha Anuched. So he said, in the verse quoted in text 75, we find an explanation of the name, quote, Goloka. In this verse, Vaikuntha spiritual world is designated by the word Brahmaloka, quote unquote. Sometimes Brahmaloka means different things. Sometimes Brahmaloka means the abode of Lord Brahma. Sometimes it means the spiritual sky. Sometimes it means the Vaikuntha planets, because the Vaikuntha planets are within the spiritual sky. In this verse, the Vaikuntha Loka spiritual world is designated by the word Brahmaloka. The spiritual world is described as attained by those whose hearts meditate on Lord Vishnu with devotional love. That's this Harivangsha quote. Tapasi yuktanam. The spiritual world is also described as para, or, quote, beyond the influence of the material energy. Then the name Goloka is defined as the residence of the Surabhi cows, Gavam. Goloka Vrindavan, as the residence of the Surabhi cows, is also described in the following verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the verse that we just read, the last verse of the chapter. Upon Krishna's return, this is the quote, text 25 of chapter 35, upon Krishna's return from herding the cows, the men, women, and cows of Vrindavan immediately forgot the scorching heat of the day. Paragraph. So they went beyond, discomfort of material mind and senses. The cows of Vrindavan are also described in the verse quoted in text 76. In the verse quoted in text 76, O hero, this is the same place where you personally protected the Surabhi cows from all dangers. That's the Govardhan Leela reference. And I didn't go and check which specific text that is. Oh, Krishna, you protect the Surabhi cows from all dangers. That's the Gopis speaking about Krishna. Not speaking to Krishna, but they're speaking to Krishna, although he's not present. Continuing, from a different reference place, Jiva Goswami, his Priti Sandarbha. Now, separation felt by the Ashraya Bhakti devotees will be discussed. So, Priti, love in separation for those who have taken shelter of Krishna. And the following text is spoken by the residents of Dwarka when Krishna returns to Dwarka. Canto 1, Chapter 11. They speak to Krishna. O lotus-eyed Lord, when you go to Hastinapur or Vraja to see your friends, one moment becomes 1,000,000,000,000 years for us. This is separation. Who belong to you and who become like eyes without the sun. The influence of separation in the citizens of Dwarka is evident in their words. Similarly, the inhabitants of Braja say, this is from this chapter 35, quote, with cheerful face, the master of the cowherds, moving with the grace of a regal elephant, like the rising moon in the evening, returns in the evening, relieving the cows of Braja from the pain experienced during the day. That's the cows that were with him, and it was hot. But just to be with Krishna, it's like, no problem. Because we heard, this is one of the outstanding messages and memories for me for this chapter, is the statement that the residents of Braja, they don't experience material pangs or material miseries. Whatever they experience, and it gives the example, like the cowherd boys say to Krishna, we're famished, we're hungry, like not just a little bit. So that's an ecstasy. When we're hungry, it's not an ecstasy. What to speak of famished. But for them, it's an ecstasy. Because it's Lila Shakti, that's the commentary. It's to assist that feeling which looks like not nice, or, is to assist in the pastime. Or because it's in the chapter that we're reading in the evening, when Krishna is in the mouth of Bakasura, the cowherd boys and Balaram faint. That's not like a nice feeling. But it's a nice feeling. It's an ecstasy. So we'll continue. The old and young cows left in Braja felt pain during the day, what to speak of human beings. Meeting after the separation is called Tushti, is described for the people of Dwarka. It goes back to the first verse of chapter 11, Canto 1. Arriving at his own prosperous city of Dwarka, Krishna, allaying the suffering of the inhabitants, blew the best of conch shells. And more on this. This is the glories of Braja and the mood of the Brajbasis and how to attain it. We heard all those things yesterday. Rupa Goswami writes, the 8 great faults are mentioned in Vishnu Yamala. Quote, faults. The 18 faults are bewilderment, sleep, error, material attachment without prema, material lust which brings suffering, fickleness, intoxication, envy, violence, exhaustion, toil, lying, anger, hankering, worry, absorption in worldly affairs, prejudice, and dependency on others. Jiva Goswami comments, this is his commentary on Rupa Goswami's writing. His commentary reads, however, the same bad qualities are considered good qualities in Krishna in relation to the devotee's prema. Then he gives some examples. Intoxication, mada, is illustrated as follows. This is now a verse from chapter 35, text 24. As Krishna, he's returning from the forest. As Krishna respectfully greets his well-wishing friends, his eyes roll slightly as if from intoxication. He wears a flower garland, and the beauty of his soft cheeks are accentuated by the brilliance of his golden earrings and the whiteness of his face, which has the color of a badara berry. Now, just a little, because we've heard all this, the intoxication is not because of, he's a little boy, it's because of ecstasy. He, seeing the residents of Vrindavan, is feeling ecstasy. He has been feeling separation from them. And when he sees them, he's feeling intoxication, ecstasy, intoxication, and his eyes roll. And we also heard, I was a little puzzled, it says the whiteness of his face, because he's Shyam. But his face paled from its normal hue because of fatigue, there's one explanation, because of feeling separation from those who he's been away from. When he sees them, that feeling, and then again meeting. So normally we would feel flushed, not, pale, but that's how our acharyas describe. Now this is the very last verse of the chapter, text 26. Shukadeva Goswami said, because all the rest was the Gopis said, but now he's back to Shukadeva Goswami said, O king, during the daytime, the women of Vrindavan took pleasure in continuously singing about the pastimes of Krishna, and those ladies' minds and hearts, absorbed in him, were filled with great festivity. Now, they're feeling separation, and the verse says they're feeling filled with great festivity. That's a contradiction. We'll hear some more. Purport, BBT purport. This verse definitely confirms that the so-called pain of the heartbroken gopis is actually a great spiritual bliss. On the material platform, pain is pain, period. This is like Hridayanda Maharaj thumbprint. But on the spiritual platform, so-called pain is simply a different variety of spiritual ecstasy. In the Western countries, people take pleasure in mixing different flavors of ice cream. That's Hridayanda Maharaj's thumbprint. To produce wonderful combinations of flavor. Similarly, on the spiritual platform, Sri Krishna and his devotees expertly mix the flavors of spiritual bliss, and thus every day was a treat for the gopis. Here's Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary. No mention of ice cream. Oh, Parikshit. The gopis' minds had concentrated on Krishna, and Krishna's mind was centered on them because Krishna and his beloved gopis were mutually Vishaya and Ashraya. You know those terms, right? The abode of love and the object of love, and they're both under the category of alambana. And then there's, which stimulates that love, that's udipana. So they're mutually for one and the other. There's the object of love and then the abode of love, and vice versa. They concentrated their minds on each other. Thus, because they continually relished each other at every moment, both in separation and meeting through their minds, it is said in this verse that they enjoyed re mire, the separation during the day. Now, because this is the Gopis chapter, it's the Gopis speaking, it doesn't mean the others don't have that same experience. They have that same experience, but the focus is on the Gopis because that's the chapter. And, one of those questions that, I don't know, it's probably in the top 10 of the doubts that people have about God If God is all good and God is all perfect, why did he make a place where people suffer? Because he could have made a place where people don't suffer. And he did. But this is a place for people to suffer. So it's not a boo-boo, not a mistake. But the suffering is forgetfulness of Krishna, and those that don't forget Krishna, that's not suffering, it's ecstasy. That which sounds to us with our material lens like misery is ecstasy. So just like that question of why does God create a place where people suffer? Why does, another one, why does Ram send Sita away? Or why did Ram make a mistake and go after the deer when he's omniscient? He certainly must have known that's not a deer, that's etc. But he did it. So why did he make a mistake? Not a mistake. It's an arrangement for ecstasy. Didn't look like ecstasy. Look at what happened after he found out that Sita was gone. That whole section, he goes mad. And Lakshman tries to steady him, and so forth. And then after Sita proved her chastity by entering fire, later he banished her. That's not nice. So anyway, there are different explanations for each of these things. Why did Krishna not return to Vrindavan when he left Vrindavan? It's a big deal. And there's different explanations. But he's enjoying. He's not enjoying the misery of the gopis. He's feeling the pain of the gopis' misery. There's a document which who do I send? Do I send it to you? And then why Krishna didn't return to Vrindavan. Eventually he did, according to our acharyas in Padma Purana, purposely to send them back to the spiritual world because they descended and so forth. It's all explained. But it's lila, and it looked like misery, but it's not. It's lila. You better watch out. If you go back to Godhead, you might experience those emotions. If you get attached to Krishna, you'll feel separation from Krishna. And you may not register that that's an ecstasy. That was really, really good. But the analysis is it's an ecstasy. Continuing, this is Priti Sandarbha. Prema has two states: union and separation. Though the person absorbed in Krishna appears to suffer in separation, actually, he has attained the highest state of bliss internally. In this way, the highest degree of prema is manifest. So here's Jiva Goswami's commentary. It wasn't Priti Sandarbha, it was something else, Vishwanath. So here's Jiva Goswami's commentary on this verse. This is the conclusion. It's like the final verse of the chapter. O King, Shukadev pacifies Parikshit, overcome with prema on hearing the Gopi's song. During the days filled with separation, they become filled with bliss because they were absorbed in Krishna, whose nature was the highest bliss. Though they suffered separation, they also experienced bliss by singing about him. Or, in this way, using other songs, they experienced bliss. They desired consciousness of him alone. By singing, by absorbing their consciousness and minds in him, They experienced the highest perfection, Mahodayaha, because he made his appearance when they sang in this way. He made his appearance. So that's described in the chapter, but they could see Krishna, although they're speaking as if they can't see Krishna. It sounds like that's mad. They cannot see Krishna, and the intensity of their separation is so strong they can see Krishna, but they still think they can't see Krishna. The seeing of him is an ecstasy that our acharyas call spurti. They can see him. Just like in this chapter. He's off in the forest and you see all these details of what he's up to. And then they pacify Mother Jasoda. We'll hear some more about this. They pacify Mother Jasoda why he's late, because she's in great distress. Maybe another demon, maybe some more trees fell on him or something. So they pacify and explain, remote, what's going on? Why is he late? He took bath and he fed the cows some water and took bath because it was very hot. He's by the bank of the river Jamuna. He's with the cowherd boys. They're wearing garlands like this. They're playing like that. They're talking like this. Then on the path on the way back, the demigods descended in their vimanas and wanted to offer obeisances and so forth. So how do they? Because they can see, although they can't see, and they can't see, they're feeling separation. So that seeing is a certain type of ecstasy, but it isn't the same as seeing. It's like the Brihat Bhagavatamrita discussion when Gopakumar is in Tapaloka, and he follows what they say, and he can see Mad and Gopal, but he concludes it's not the same. It's not the same. It's not the same. He wants to go to Braja and be with Mad and Gopal. So he gets there because the intensity of attraction and attachment and hankering is so strong, Krishna reciprocates. We've got a long ways to go, right? By his special appearances later, their enjoyment of his love became special. You know, Rasa Lila, for example. Paragraph, because he is kind, Vatsala, Bhakta Vatsala, he makes his appearance. This causes direct enjoyment. Their enjoyment increases in accordance with his appearances. Previously, during separation, because he appeared in their minds, there was partial enjoyment. Thus they enjoyed Remi Re at all times, even in separation. Sanatan Goswami's commentary. This is the conclusion, O king. He pacifies Parikshit, overcome with prema, on hearing the Gopis' song. They sang about the pastimes of Krishna, the form of highest bliss. His pastimes are also the form of the highest bliss. In the daytime, a time of suffering, the Gopis became happy, Remi Re, because their minds were absorbed in him. They became happy singing many pastimes like this. Because their hearts and minds were absorbed in him, they suffered in prema at all times, even when they were meeting, because he's going to leave after a while. By singing about his pastimes, Krishna directly appeared to them, Mahodaya. They sang when he returned at the end of the day, by singing of his form and pastimes and absorbing their hearts in him. At the end of the day, he manifested himself as if in person, though he was not present. At night, however, they directly saw him and experienced happiness. In talks to gain relief from the pain during the day, this is not mentioned. Paragraph, they passed the day singing constantly. In the night, they became happy by directly seeing him. By singing in this way, they became happy with directly seeing him. Paragraph, there are 3 verses for each pair. So there's the introductory verse, the concluding verse, and then there's pairs, and there's 3 groupings of those pairs. That's what he's saying. Morning, noon, and afternoon pastimes. One pair of verses is directed to Yashoda. One pair of verses describes their own position. At the very end, there is one pair of verses expressing joy on his coming. The song thus has 12 pairs. Times 2 is 24, and then the beginning and closing, 26. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes, "My dear King Parikshit, the gopis' minds, tat manaska, were absorbed in Krishna, and Krishna's mind was absorbed in them. Therefore, since Krishna and his beloved gopis shared both roles of being the object, ashraya, and the subject of love, vishaya, they concentrated their minds on each other." And I think the translation is backwards. The object is vishaya, the abode is ashraya. But anyway. Thus, because they continually relished each other at every moment, both in separation and meeting through their minds, it is said in this verse that the gopis enjoyed re mi re, the separation during the day. Prema has 2 states, union and separation, very similar. Though the person absorbed in Krishna appears to be suffering, when he is separated from Krishna, actually he is internally relishing the highest state of bliss. On the spiritual platform, the so-called pain of separation is simply a different variety of transcendental ecstasy. Thus, pure love of God is the crown jewel of all goals of human endeavor. And I think I should end just because of time. There's another nice section, I guess. We'll do that tomorrow. Stay tuned. It's describing the gopis becoming residents of Dwarka and marrying Krishna, that mystery. Rupa Goswami describes it in his Vidagdha Madhava, and Jiva Goswami is mirroring it in Gopal Champu. Stay tuned tomorrow. Okay. Well, just some closing remarks for this morning. My thoughts are similar to yesterday, so it's kind of repeating what I spoke yesterday in conclusion. What can we understand about these things? And, take a number of steps back, and what can we understand about anything? Or what can we understand about who we are? Or what can we understand about who is God? What can we understand about his activities in Braja? Or his different abodes and so forth and so on? What can we understand about that which is beyond the senses and beyond the mind? So you can just be a materialist and say, I'll rely on that which I can see and measure. That's called science. And what's beyond the senses to be able to perceive, or beyond the mind to be able to rationalize, is something you can't even talk about. And if you're dishonest, you can say it doesn't exist, because all that exists is that which the senses perceive and you can measure. There's a celebrated atheist professor, British fellow, that I somehow stumbled upon it. His tours of bashing anything that's beyond the senses. And one of his, part of the clip, part of the whole thing is, where's the proof? Pramana for the scientist is data, measurable, perceivable data, and that's proof. So where's the proof of that which is beyond the senses? Where's the proof? And that's the starting point and the ending point, and everything is matter and the laws governing matter, and beyond that, where's the proof? So we can infer things from measurable data that infers something, but we're never going to know, because you can't know that way. You can infer something. But how do we know who we are? Like yesterday. Some people don't believe in the soul, some people believe in the soul, and try it sometime. I did it. Ask people, do you believe in the soul? Yes. What's the soul? And it's kind of hilarious or sad. The different ideas that people believe in the soul, what they think the soul is, without going into it because of time. So, what's the soul anyways? And what to speak of understanding the soul, and what to speak of realizing the soul. So even the soul, something that's so close to us, Prabhupada would speak like this. What to speak of then understanding God? If you can't understand who you are, how can you understand God? Because both are not within the purview of the senses. So you understand through sound. This is our message yesterday. And here's sound about the crown jewel of all goals of human endeavor. What does it look like? What does it feel like? It's feelings beyond our feelings. It's our present capacity. Just detouring a little bit. The universal form, or Vedic cosmology, which is the universal form, we can't see it. And if you just look at the empiric information, how many yojanas tall is this and that and wide and so many things, forget it. A mountain that's 80,000 miles tall, forget it. It's mythology. There's no such thing. But where does it come from? And so a simple explanation, and I'll end with this because it's really easy to go off. Those who have higher consciousness can experience things that those that have lower consciousness can't experience. Sensory power becomes more acute. Conscious perception becomes more acute. I'll give a little example. A very nice devotee did a whole seminar on Vedic cosmology, and he explained like this: what's a book? You can describe the physical thing. A book is this and that and the other thing. That's what a book is. But that's not. It's a very incomplete description of what a book is. The book has ideas. The explanation of a book is incomplete without the message that the book conveys. There's the physical book and there's the message of the book. So the message of the book is one word to describe it. He uses the word conceptual. So there's, space and objects in space that you can perceive with the senses. And then there's a conceptual or a higher consciousness picture of what cosmology is, or what the form of the universe is. And it's described in that language. And those that have higher consciousness can read a book and understand its message. Those that have higher consciousness can understand the universal form. And those of us that don't have higher consciousness, we're scratching our heads like. So it requires a paradigm shift and a higher consciousness shift. And by hearing, it helps elevate consciousness. That's exactly what Canto 2, Chapter 1 says, understanding the personal feature through the universal form. Without elaborating, one day I'll, Krishna permitting, have a seminar on all of this. And most likely, the initial interest will be high, and then when people start to hear what's going on, the interest will wane. The number of people that want to hear all this will diminish a whole lot. Because, this is nice, but how much do we understand this? And it's sweet. But the other has such a big role in the Bhagavatam, and there's a reason for it. Sarga, Visarga, and Sthanam. That's 3 out of the 10 topics. So understanding that will help us understand this. It takes higher consciousness to understand who we are, or anything. And the pramana is not the senses. The pramana is Shabda pramana. So we're getting an opportunity, though unqualified, to hear Shabda Pramana about the crown jewel of all goals of human endeavor, and get a little inspired to try for it, or at least move closer to it, and then live our lives accordingly. Perform your prescribed duty and always think of Krishna. Those 2 things. Don't neglect your prescribed duty, perform, and always think of Krishna. Okay, so let's see if there's some discussion on this elevated subject matter. In the room, or it's anyone in the room, then we'll go to online and back and forth. That seems best.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So this is a few. I think it was yesterday or day before yesterday in the morning class. You mentioned, that like the Vrindavan in the material world when Krishna came is a manifestation of Goloka.
Yes.
Spiritual world. And then today you mentioned how the Krishna revisited Vrindavan to send everyone back to the spiritual world.
Say it again. Krishna does what?
He revisited Vrindavan to send the residents to the spiritual world. And so, what does that mean for I believe there's some trees, I think it was the tree that Krishna climbed when he was going to fight Kaliya. I might be wrong. That's
Kadamba tree.
Yeah, the Kadamba tree that's still there. So I don't know. I'm just trying. What does that mean for
I get your question. Let me say something else first and then respond to your question specifically. When Krishna returned, according to Padma Purana, is after killing Dantavakra, which happened after killing Shishupal, then killing Dantavakra. And he killed Dantavakra. This is Jiva Goswami explaining this. He killed Dantavakra just by the gate of Mathura. There's a village, Jiva Goswami says to this day, it bears a similar name to Dantavakra. So from that place, the gate of Mathura, he then entered Braja. He got his cowherd boy costume and went to Braja, spent 2 months, and then his mission was threefold. The Prakat Lila became Aprakat. The residents that are his eternal associates have eternal pastimes in Braja, and they manifested those Prakat, Aprakat, from Prakat to Aprakat, to unmanifest. 2, the demigods who came as partial expansions under the order of Vishnu to appear and assist Krishna, he sent them back to their heavenly abode. And a Vimana descended to take the eternal associates of Krishna back to the spiritual world. And 3, he himself, because he was in Aprakat, he was in Prakat, back to the spiritual world. And 3, he went to Dwarka to wrap up things in Dwarka. That's what Jiva Goswami describes. Now, your question, what about that tree? So it doesn't mean that the trees of Vrindavan disappeared. Or the place just came vacant. The bumblebees went away, and the cows went away, and everybody went away. But the spiritual manifestation entered into an uppercut stage, and the living entities returned to their abodes, their natural place. So the tree is still there. Well, let's because who can say if that's the same tree? But everyone says it's the same tree. So, same tree. It's certainly possible. Trees can live a long time. Maybe it's a grafted tree of one that was there, or whatever it is. Because that happened in 1973 or 74. Guru Das took a group of us from the Mayapur Vrindavan festival. He took us around Vrindavan, and he said, we went to a place where there's a Kalpavriksha tree. It's known. It's a tree under which Lord Chaitanya sat when he was feeling separation from the Gopis, and he turned golden in color. And Lord Chaitanya went to the same place and turned blackish in color. Kalpavriksha tree. So, Guru Das told us that nice story. And there's a temple, a Gaudiya Math temple right there by the side of the river Jamuna. And then the Kalpavriksha tree died, after some years. So but they grafted, and now there's another one there. So whether it's the original or a graft of the original or whatever it is, trees don't disappear and things don't disappear. But so the spiritual potency for those who have bhakti can be accessed. That's the aprakat feature for those that we can't see Krishna going out herding the cows, but Krishna's going out herding the cows with the cowherd boys, and the Gopis and this and that, and the other thing, the uppercut lila is going on. Okay? Is there something online?
Not right now.
Not yet. Anyone else in the room? Okay.
just had a quick comment about something I'd heard before about the word vipralamba. I heard in another class that one meaning of it is it's to attain something from a distance. So I just thought that was kind of cool. I was wondering if you could say anything about that.
I never heard that explanation, so I can't say anything about it. Anyone else? You have something?
Guru Maharaj, just wanted to say that today's explanation, we were talking about separation. I know you have been talking about it since you came here, but something that helped me, the conception that I had. Actually, many years ago, I asked you this question as to why Krishna did not visit, go back to Vrindavan. At least that conception that I had was the separation is more painful than...
Separation is what?
Separation, love in separation.
Yeah.
Is very painful, and love in union is the best. That's the kind of, idea that I had. And today's description that you're talking about, it kind of helps me kind of get over that kind of conception, that both are
Ecstasy.
Ecstasy, yes. That's
Varieties.
it's just varieties. And
Ecstasy is not monotonous. It's filled with variety.
yes, and also the Gopis, they're experiencing the pain, but at the same time they're singing songs, and by doing that they're connecting.
I'm sure you noticed, one paragraph says pain, the next paragraph says ecstasy, or one paragraph says ecstasy and next says pain. And they're concurrent. The pain is an ecstasy, the ecstasy is a pain.
Yeah, it's still kind of hard to understand. It's a high.
Yeah, but it's not material. Material is, as the Vrindavan Maharaj purport says, pain is pain, period. And then this is something else.
Yes.
We just it's a new set of rules. It doesn't fit our paradigm. So how do we look at you have to have a different lens. And how do you get that lens? Through sound.
Yes, Maharaj. And also, someone was asking Nityananda Pran Prabhu in the Yatra lectures, the Nasik Yatra. Same thing, like when Ram was feeling so much pain that even Sita was, and he was explaining also that is ecstasy.
He's the supreme controller. He could have, just blown up the universe or anything.
Yes.
It's an ecstasy.
Yes.
Lots of people, I've heard many people say, it was wrong, it's cruel, or why, or, what did Sita do wrong? And all those things.
I share that. I used to also, at least theoretically, it is still high, but I kind of...
It's really high. So even hearing what you just described and what we've been reading, it's still hard to process it. It's not, okay, now I got it, thanks, let's move on. It takes more purification and more elevation of consciousness. But it's, we're at the beginning stages. Okay?
Yes, just one clarification. Is it that the Gopis, that they know that they're experiencing pain?
Yes.
But I'm doing this for Krishna. Is that the kind of feeling that they have? Or is it like
They're not selfish, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Their happiness is Krishna's happiness, but they also have subjective feelings. And those subjective feelings are, we can say, it's part of the rasa of conjugal love. So the conjugal love in Brindavan is Krishna is the object. But then the subject feels feelings. And it intensifies the love. So it's don't put it in a box. Okay. It's very dynamic. Online anything?
This question is from Uttama Bhakta Das, and he asks, is the only purpose of separation to increase the taste of union, or is there more?
Well, the purpose of separation is Krishna's happiness. So if we look at things through the lens of Krishna's happiness, that's the purpose. And yes, it does increase the happiness of meeting, but the happiness is Krishna's happiness. And it keeps toggling back and forth for Krishna's happiness. It's never increasing. Anything else in the room? Next.
I have two questions, but they're...
He has to turn the sound on. You did? Okay.
I have two questions, but they're not related to the class.
Okay.
The first one is a little earlier on in Krishna book about when Krishna breaks the cart.
Yeah.
When he's a little baby. Is there a cart demon, or did he just break the cart?
There's a cart demon hiding himself somehow either beneath the cart or within the cart. My understanding is it's within the cart. Kind of like a ghost can inhabit an object, a mannequin or a cart, or kind of like that.
Okay.
And Krishna knew.
Okay. I was reading the Krishna book, and the two times that the breaking of the cart is mentioned so far, I haven't read the whole book yet, but it doesn't mention a demon. At least in the Krishna book. I don't know. I don't know about the Bhagavatam. It just says that Krishna broke the cart, but it doesn't say anything about a demon in it.
There's a demon within the cart.
Okay.
The Acharya's commentaries go into it. I mean, I haven't read that recently, but...
Okay. The second question is about what is your expectation of your disciples or followers in regards to hearing. The reason I'm asking this is because I've just recently been thinking how you have a lot of audio recordings.
Have a lot of...
Audio recordings.
Yeah.
And there are constantly more coming, and sometimes I feel overwhelmed about how to
Process.
keep up. And also, I've been trying to hear at least a class a day, but I feel like I need to be hearing more and like constantly in order to keep up. But I was just wondering, like, you know, if you could help me just overcome my anxiety of not being able to keep up.
I know some others that are feeling the same. So, your question, let me say it back. Please help me understand how to overcome my anxiety. Or the other side is, what's my expectation? Is my expectation everybody's supposed to keep up? Obviously not. You know, some people are. And some people are going, wow, keep doing it. Morning and evening. And if I miss one, I hear it, you know. But that's not an expectation from my side. It's just like, I don't know, somebody that really is absorbed in kirtan. Now, when someone's really absorbed in kirtan, is their expectation that everybody in the room is just going to stay put and hear the whole kirtan from beginning to end, and then you can get up and go away? And if you don't, there's something wrong with you. That's not the expectation of the kirtan. The expectation of the kirtan person and his, musicians or her musicians is to make the sound vibration because it's purifying. I mean, as I'm speaking this, I'm thinking of there's really nice recordings of the Radha Dash Mellows and their January 2020 kirtan. And I was watching the video of Madhava's kirtan, and I noticed that he didn't even open his eyes for an hour and 36 minutes. He didn't even look around the room. He was internal. And who knows what he was feeling because of that absorption. To shut down the senses and except the ear. And when he opened his eyes, it was to look at the mridanga player, to give him a signal for something, I don't know. So that's Madhava, and so someone that's speaking Krishna Katha, it says make that sound vibration. I wish to be absorbed. I wish to have my consciousness cleansed, and it's enlivening to know that other people are also hearing. And I've shared Madhava's that recording with a lot of people because it's really fantastic. And then I go to other things and I come back and hear it again because it's really fantastic. So, if you can't hear all of Madhava's kirtan, then hear some part of Madhava's kirtan, and then the other kirtaniers. And how can you hear all the kirtans? How can you hear all the classes? And you have your favorite ones, and then sometimes the favorite one changes to that favorite one. And so there's variegatedness. That's the part of how to handle your how do I keep up concern. It's a little bit like reading. Some people read a little bit every day, and some people don't read a little bit every day, but read a whole bunch during certain periods of time, and deeply immerse themselves, and rather than the everyday reading, some an hour or two or whatever people like to read. So there's different ways. So that's another thing you can deal with your anxiety is set aside and such and such time I'm just gonna really focus on hearing, because that has its benefit too. You hear the sequence and hear the sequence and hear the sequence and hear the sequence all in a row. Ooh, that's another kind of hearing besides every day. And if neither of those happens, you just, as time permits and circumstance permits and obligations and everything that's going on, you hear as much as you are able, always wishing to make it more. That's how to handle that emotion. Okay? Microphone? You have to get up and get the microphone. Online?
Yes, Maharaj. There's one question from Sucharita Devidasi, and she says, Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj.
Could you do me a favor? Skip that preamble. Okay, thanks.
If anyone approaches demigods for Krishna Bhakti, can they get it?
Well, generally people don't approach the demigod for Krishna Bhakti. That's Bhagavad Gita. People approach the demigods for something else. Because if people wanted Krishna Bhakti, they wouldn't go to demigods. They'd go to those that are profusely distributing Krishna Bhakti. But let's just say there's a Rudra Sampradaya and persons can approach Lord Shiva for Krishna Bhakti. Or the Prachetas, they didn't approach Lord Shiva approached them and he gave them Vishnu Bhakti. So, it's possible, but, not common. And, what's I'll ask the questioner, why are you asking that question? How's it going to benefit? It's a little academic. So I'm not discouraging, but think carefully before you ask questions. How is this going to help me in my progress of Krishna consciousness? Not just information. Okay? Anything else in the room? Anything else online? We're done. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.